Alright, tonight's medieval combat video review is a special request from the Kingdom of Northshield in the SCA. In this one we have Sir Hanman Hebenstreit versus Frug Marchant. Apologies if I get the pronunciation of either the French or German, I assume, wrong there. So anyway, this is SCA combat, so no grappling allowed, and a single hard blow to the head or body is considered a disabling hit. A hard blow to the arm or leg also disables that limb. From the knee down, you're invulnerable, and hands and wrists are invulnerable. Otherwise, you can look up the SCA rules, and we'll move forward. A couple things to point out. I am not familiar with a lot of fighting from Northshield, so there's a decent chance I'm missing some details and techniques that are common there. I'm out in Kaid, I fought in the West and on Tyr, so a little bit different combat style. Let's take a look. Oh, the other thing to point out, this is practice footage, so they might be working on particular things. It's maybe a different level of intensity than, say, a tournament fight, so just bear in mind that this is them training. So right off the bat, the first couple things that I notice, and I'll just describe my headspace when I step into a fight like this, is we have offhanded fighters. Sir Hanman is fighting left-handed. He's got a center grip shield, and it's relatively small. He's also got quite a long sword. I'm told he's quite tall as well, like 6'3" or something like that. So he's fighting with a long sword, and Frug is, I believe, about 6 foot tall, fighting with a medium-length sword, arm strap shield, and the heater shape. So right off, we've got some interesting style matchups, right? So with two people that have their sword on the same side, a lot of the angles change. Left-handers tend to be specialized in fighting right-handers, and right-handers tend to not be specialized in fighting left-handers, right? Same as the southpaw advantage in baseball. That means that you end up generally with two very common openings that people shoot for. There's the offside head, which would be the left side of Frug's head, and the leg wrap, which is the outside right side of Frug's leg. And that's mirrored for both people. Those are usually covered pretty well when you're not right-handed versus left-handed. So we'll probably see a lot of those shots thrown in this fight. The other thing I'll do, I decided to try taking a look at this fight by the numbers, and I'll go over the numbers again. But in the course of this fight, Sir Hanman and I'll explain what these mean later, Sir Hanman throws 8 offside head shots, 5 onside body wraps, and 4 other shots. 1 thrust, 1 leg wrap, 1 head wrap, I'm sorry, he throws 3 other shots and 1 fake. We see no combos in this particular fight from Sir Hanman. Frug throws 8 offside heads, same number, 1 body wrap, 4 head wraps, 1 head snap, and 1 body snap. So a couple more shots, but very focused on the offside head and the head wrap, whereas Sir Hanman's very focused on the offside head and the body wrap. So we'll get into that a little bit during our analysis. So let's take a look at, we'll just let the fight run through. It's a relatively brief fight. We'll let it run through at speed. So they're setting up in medium range. Sir Hanman closes in, throws a few shots. These guys are crossing up, throwing a lot of the same sort of shots at each other. Nothing's really landing. We get a sense for the pacing and timing of the fight. There's a couple times Frug lets Sir Hanman away from the wall. We'll also see Sir Hanman's taking a couple minor angle changes with his feet, and Frug doesn't, and that's the killing shot. So we're going to go back a little ways, and this is a relatively long video I'm pulling from, so apologies if it is a little slow for me to go back. So let's go through in slow motion without stopping, and I'll talk about a couple things as they come up, and then we can cover individual exchanges. So here we are, we're going to go in slow motion. Right off the bat, they've got relatively forward guards, so their swords are providing some defense. Means you can't throw with tremendous power without some wind-up. Now we're seeing wind-up, but you've got a pretty good defense when your sword is out in front of you. We also see Sir Hanman's playing a lot with range. He's basically voiding out to avoid some of Frug's shots. Frug backs up and immediately forward to try to change the pacing of the footwork. We're also seeing Sir Hanman's shield get bobbled a little bit. That's one of the weaknesses of a center grip shield. It's easier to knock around, whereas Frug's shield is being much more stable. That's a benefit of the arm strap. In return, you get less flexibility. So here we see a couple shots landing, but they're not landing clean. They're not necessarily landing on edge, and neither of them are expecting the other to take it. That is going to end up being the killing shot. Here's the first leg shot of the fight, and it's almost just a setup for that headshot. So let's go in and take a look at some of the exchanges here. Oops, went a little far. Going forward again, many fighters. Sorry, this goes from regular fast forward to super fast forward, and vice versa. Okay, almost back to where we need to be. Alright, so at this point I'm going to be sort of going frame by frame and manually controlling things. Let's move into the fight. Now, at this point I'm scrolling forward slowly. Right, so they're stepping in. Right now you see Sir Hanman's got a bit of a bend in his knees. He's definitely in a combat stance here. Frug is just getting into his combat stance. And he's protecting his face and head with that basket, probably dipping that shield down a little bit as a bit of a bait, as in like, hit me here. But there's a pretty good sword defense against it. Sir Hanman's got a little bit more of an aggressive stance right now. His basket is protecting him a little bit from headshots. He can drop that shield down or over towards us to protect the body, but his sword blade is chambered back, so he can get a lot of forward motion on it for power. Right, so we see a little bit more aggressive stance from Sir Hanman. As we move forward, though, it's not one of those positions where either of them have their hand behind their head or anything like that, basically wound up to throw really hard. So in this opening shot, we see Sir Hanman do a feint, the only feint of the fight, that also serves to generate some power. So as he steps in, you see that feint to the offside head, and that's going to allow him to uncork the blade around to the other side of the body. That's probably one of the hardest throws we see of the fight. Now, because it hits the shield there before it connects with the body, at this point it's still flat. So in the SCA, you need to land with, although they're basically round or mostly round clubs, you're still supposed to land on the front or the back edge of the sword. The goal here is to hit with the back edge of the sword around the edge of the shield, but you can see that Frug has kicked that shield over and stepped a little bit, which has basically made it so that that shot isn't going to get around. Right? Now, here we see Frug do the same thing he's done a few times, or will do a few times. He steps back, and then he's going to power back forward off of that foot to change from a defensive move to an offensive move with his footwork. Right? Now he drives forward with that foot, and he switched from stepping back to stepping forward. I think that's honestly one of the strengths we see from him in this fight as he takes a step back, plants, and powers forward, and takes control of the footwork that way. Now, Sir Hanman, if we watch his feet during the rest of this fight, we're going to see that he's got very mobile feet, very light, quick footwork. The trade-off there is that you're not very planted. It's difficult to drive a ton of power from the ground, but he's got very fluid footwork, and he's comfortable throwing from a lot of different positions. He's also comfortable going sword foot forward, sword foot back, so he's really fluid with his footwork, as opposed to very grounded and sort of, I don't want to say stompy, but a lot of people have a little bit more rigid footwork. You know, you might say a more stable stance or whatever, but, you know, he's quite comfortable being fluid. The other thing I'll point out is during this fight, we see maybe 2 small angle shifts from Frug, which I would say is something like, this is going to be a little difficult to draw on screen, but, you know, where you're taking a minor step on the ground to either side while either moving forward or backward. I don't see any major angle changes from either fighter. Sir Hanman makes 6 minor angle changes, basically a half step to either direction. So we're seeing a little bit more active defensive footwork from Sir Hanman, but neither of them are stepping deep around each other or making radical angle changes with their feet. So we press forward. Here's that first head wrap. So this head wrap is the second most popular shot that Frug's going to throw. There's one. Then we see the offsides. These are going to be the bread and butter. This is the one time we see them both really throw at the same time. They're both throwing the same shot, and that's why it ends up being defended. You can see they almost look like a mirror of each other. That's that offside shot that everyone wants when you're fighting against someone who's offhanded compared to you. Neither of them really land. And at this point, you can see that Frug's forward momentum is stopped. Hanman's backward momentum continues, and that's why that shot doesn't land. Now, at this point, honestly, Frug's just probably keeping himself defended by throwing a shot that Hanman would have to deal with if he stayed there. They both settle back down to their guard. At this point, you can see Sir Hanman's got a little bit more sword-forward posture, so he's going to be generating less power from there. So remember, at the beginning of the fight, his sword was back, the blade was back, now the blade's angled forward, so slightly different stance. He's also, maybe he's just demonstrating, confidence in the headspace game, but he's no longer as planted as he was at the beginning of the fight, despite the fact that they're in range for some of the longer range shots. So now you see Sir Hanman do the opposite as Frug does. Hanman's really good at reading the footwork. I'm going to go back just a little bit. That thing I was talking about before, okay, we've gone back. I'm going to go forward again. Watch the feet of both fighters. So here we see Frug takes that back step, powers off of that left leg again to go forward, and Sir Hanman is going to take a step forward and power back off the foot he just put down to go backwards. Watch. Frug plants, powers forward. Hanman plants, powers backward. Now, in this case, I would say Sir Hanman's just a little off balance. His spine is still over his back foot, but because he's pushed off of that front foot and sort of tipped his body back, we see that his spine is just a little out of alignment. I go out of alignment all of the time. I don't necessarily think it's bad, and he's not way out over his back foot. He's not like here where he's falling backwards. One thing I've been trying to do, however, is, and it's tricky, it's something I'm learning to do a little bit, but I still haven't mastered, is to, instead of leaning back, rotate my pelvis back. Basically, like sticking your butt out in a sense, but it's actually a roll as opposed to sticking your butt out. And what that does, instead of tipping your body back, it tips your body forward, but pulls you back. You fall backward in a sense, but you're a little bit more stable. It's difficult to describe. It's something I've only been working on recently, but it's another way to do that backward movement. Regardless, Sir Frug's offside shot is a relatively short-range offside, so Sir Hanman gets out of there. Here's the one thrust we see of the fight. If we go back just a little bit and take a look at the setup of the thrust, it's not a great angle on the thrust, but it does look like it would hit where Frug was before he started moving forward. So the stab comes, but Frug's head is moved. So it glances off. Now, Frug, here, this is a really good wind-up as far as I'm concerned. It's a little open in the arm, but at this point we don't know if it's going to be an offside to the right side of Sir Hanman's head or if it's going to be an onside to the left side of Sir Hanman somewhere. It develops into a bit of a weird wrap, though. And here we see the benefit of Sir Hanman taking one of those small angle changes. So take a look where Sir Hanman is. He was along that line, now he's along this line. He's taken one of those small angle changes, which helps explain why his head isn't where Frug is still throwing. So we go back a little bit. I guess that angle change actually happened a bit earlier than I was saying. So here, you see he's on a line this way, but when he starts retreating, he's moving in that direction. And I'm not sure that Frug necessarily follows that change. So as he continues to back up this way, it looks like he's managed to get a little bit of the angle out of the way. Now, this is a point where the timing of the fight, I think, starts going tack, 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 tack. I throw, you throw. I throw, you throw. And as you throw, it goes, I defend, you defend. I defend, you defend. There's a couple places where they break that rhythm, but the rest of the fight really falls into that sort of pattern. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but is really effective when you break that pattern. So let's say it goes, I throw, you throw. I throw, you throw. I throw, you throw. I throw, I throw, I throw. That can be more effective at getting past your opponent. So we're not taking turns necessarily. It's not like ping pong in a rally. It's more like you just throw a little bit of an offbeat in there. So that's one of the things that I think at the end of the fight makes a bit of a difference. Here we're continuing to see that body wrap that Sir Hanman is going to throw a lot. We're going to see the head wrap that Frug throws a lot. But we're not seeing something that I am surprised that we're not seeing more of, is throwing into these openings. So because their sword is towards us, like towards the camera, it's not too difficult if you get your hand into the right position to get around each other's shield and throw that leg wrap. I mean, that's one of the most common shots I'm used to seeing when fighting in an offhanded fight, such that, honestly, when I fight someone offhanded, you can see if this is roughly where Frug's shield is. My shield, when I fight a left-hander, it looks like this, protecting that offside leg. I'm sorry, protecting against that leg wrap. So it would be an offside leg if I was fighting a right-hander. So, and if we look at Sir Hanman's shield, in this case he's maintaining like really good position against Frug's sword. He can feel it. He's also rolled the shield a little bit to the left, which is a good way to suck power out on the block. But a lot of left-handers are going to drop that shield lower into a position down here. So I made a bunch of a mess on the screen, but this really surprises me. Maybe they both know that the other has a really good leg defense. But if I was to step into either of these guys' shoes, I would be trying to rip one of the other guy's legs off. So here we're seeing that offside head that's always there. And Frug's doing a really good job. If you look at the rotation of the shield, he's rotated the shield this way a lot. Right? Part of the reason for that is because it gets this point up in the air and protects against that offside head. It's a little awkward, especially with an arm strap shield, but it does protect this portion of the head up here pretty well. Eventually that's the thing that gets hit, but that's why he's rotating the shield that much. Now, again, in my impulse at this point, if I'm Frug, is instead of going throw, defend, throw, defend, throw, defend, he just finished a throw, do what's called a teardrop return, which is just do a little loop-de-loo with the tip of the sword, basically, it's called a teardrop because it looks like a sideways tear, so I'll make it blue. The shot comes in low, you bring it back, loop it around, and into the same spot, right? And you can do a modified teardrop where you throw here, like he did, recover, bam, down there. So I'd be throwing for that leg personally. It looks like a good spot. It's going to be tough for Sir Hanman to see it. I'd be going for that right now. And you can see it's one of the few things that comes really close to actually killing Sir Hanman. Right? Now the challenge is Sir Hanman's made this big step back. Rewind, go forward, takes that step back, and this is awesome shot placement. It comes underneath the shield edge and hits him. So that's great, right? So that's an excellent position. However, we'll see that it doesn't land hard enough. This is out on the thrusting tip of the sword. That's a piece of foam on the tip of the sword that makes it not hit quite as hard. And also, we see a couple other problems with this shot. One of them is that Hanman has stepped back and his momentum is pulling him away from the shot. And the other is that it's probably flat. So at this point, I'm not sure if that isn't like a snapshot, which would hit with the front of the blade, or if it's intended to be a wrap, which is supposed to hit with the back of the blade. But really, this is hitting with the flat at this point. If that had been aimed at the leg, which, albeit, is not a kill, it's much better to get the kill than the body shot, but if you look at the position of the leg is still in range. It's actually much closer, right? So the distance from the hand to the body is that long, and the distance of the hand to the leg is shorter. So that might have landed with power, and instead of a shot that Sir Hanman says no. And it looks like Frug agrees, like that didn't really land well. Okay, now here's a place where Sir Hanman is sort of timing a counterpunch. So Frug has thrown that offside head, and Sir Hanman is now, instead of waiting for the full shot to recover, going, you throw, I throw, you throw, I throw. He's gone, you throw, I throw. If that makes sense. I'm sorry. If I knew musical terminology, I guess I would say like a quarter note or something like that. So he's throwing, but it's still, in this case, it's close to landing, but because it's just a little late, Frug's able to get that shield edge out. So what likely happened here is that somewhere between 50 and 100% of the power went into Frug's shield, as he was just barely able to get it over in time, and take the most of the power out of that body wrap. That is, I think, one of the 5 body wraps that we see Sir Hanman throw. So Frug doesn't take that, and you can see the shield still powering that direction, so that shield probably picked up a ton of that block, right? The other thing, I'm going to go back again. On this wrap, you can see it is, as it lands, bang, it's on edge, right? So the edges of Sir Hanman's sword are white, so you can see that the back edge was properly oriented just at the last moment, right? And then it rolls flat after that shot. So if it had landed, it would have been good. That is another head wrap here. If I might make one suggestion on these head wraps, because we see 5 of these thrown, go back here. Sir Hanman picks it up relatively easily, and because it's been thrown a few times already, if you were to slide this foot forward in a similar situation, there's a decent chance you might be able to beat or at least force a deeper block on that punch block, right? So if that foot takes a step in, or even better, a step, step this direction off camera, you can get a little further around with that head wrap. So right here, bang, easily defeated. And I kind of take it back. That was a really deep block on Sir Hanman's part. I take it back. I think it would have been difficult to get around that block because he did block so deep. So maybe it's best not to take that step after all. Of course, the disadvantage to such a deep block is it puts you in a pretty tough position to defend. However, look, he's got his sword in this region to help defend against anything on that side. So if we see, for the sake of argument, another one of those loopy teardrop, or like I was describing before, loop the tip of the sword and do a teardrop into the body, Sir Hanman's got an attack on that side that he's moving the blade out of the way. That might have been a good opportunity to throw there. But here they're going, again, back and forth, back and forth. And this is, I believe, is the final pass of the fight. So there's that offside. Now this is pretty close. Really good targeting. Just over the shield edge. And if Sir Hanman had stepped forward into that shot, that might have hit the arm, might have hit the face, but he wasn't stepping forward at the time, right? So just misses. Here's an excellent opportunity for the counter punch. So he goes in for the counter punch, throws for the head, and Frug gets the shield up to block it. Right? So if Frug didn't have such good shield defense, that would have been a great counter to the head. Another head wrap, same defense, same block, counter punch, and in this case, maybe makes a little bit of contact, but you can see that Frug is also leaned away from the headshot, so if it touches the helmet, doesn't touch it much, it definitely hits the top of the shield as well. In this case, you can see, for the first time in my opinion, really reaching for that shot. If we look at the arm position that Sir Hanman's using, he's got his elbow really high, he's reached far across his body, and here he's doing the sort of body protection that really covers that entire offside body here. All of this is covered by that shield. The leg is still open, but he's able to get a really deep angle. That's almost enough to hit Frug right there. If it wasn't for the lean back, that might have been a good shot. Right? Now, the other thing that we're seeing is none of these shots so far have been something that the opponent wasn't expecting. If you look, each of them moves into defense. It moves into the correct defense and block, right? So there's no point where you see someone blocking the left side when in fact the shot is going for the right side. There's no place where you see someone blocking the leg when the shot is going for the head, or needing to choose and say, I don't know whether that's going to the head or the leg, so I need to block with both my shield and my sword. They're both reading each other's attacks really, really well. Some of that comes from a pretty expert defense. Some of it comes from the fact that the very first thing we saw was a feint, and it's the only feint we've seen so far. There are no other fakes or feints thrown. So I might be tempted to throw a couple hand pops, an eye fake, a shuffle step, something to get my opponent to react and respond so that they're committed to one defense and try to get around it. So that very first opening fake offside to body wrap is the only feint either fighter's thrown at this point. I'm not really good at fakes and feints, so I'm not saying it would work if I tried that, but I would probably be trying a fake at this point. So we see, in this case, both throwing the shot at the same time. Neither of them land really well. In this case, Sir Hanman's shot is rolling onto edge, so if the shield wasn't there, it probably would have been on edge by the time it hits the body. Frug's shot at this point is flat on Sir Hanman's arm, but his arm is stopping the blade from rolling over, so hopefully it would have rolled onto edge by the time it got to the body, if it had. Now here's an interesting opportunity. This one just occurred to me. If we go back just a little bit, here's an opportunity for some really cool dirty pool that would be allowed. If Sir Hanman wanted to, he could drop his shield at this point onto the basket and sort of bind or trap up that sword a little bit. You're not allowed to grapple with the body, but you can do shield to weapon contact all you want. At this point also, Frug, if we look at how close their shields are together, Frug could do something like take the basket of his shield, scoop it behind Hanman's shield, and yank, like punch across his body in an effort to pull that shield away while bringing his own sword up and over into an offside. The way I drew it on screen isn't quite right, I apologize, but basically if he took that left hand shield and, how do I describe this on screen? If he takes this shield edge and pushes that shield down and out, then rolls his hand, he can, if we get that out of the way, pulls the elbow back, he can actually recover the sword across his body and throw an offside in the same direction where Sir Hanman's shield was, into the deep, like a deep body offside, into the armpit, something nasty like that. Now that's a big commitment, but because he's got the arm strap shield and Sir Hanman's got the center boss shield, he's got the strength advantage on that shield. So he might be able to do like a nice shield hook and rip, and while his body's rotating this way from the shield rip, he can also be using that same rotation to throw an overhead offside into that armpit or something. It's an option. Meanwhile, like I said, Sir Hanman could be messing with Frug's sword there if he wanted to. The other thing is they both actually have a really good leg defense at the moment because their sword blades are blocking their legs. All right, and we're almost done here. Here we see an attempted head wrap, really good sword block. I really like this sword block from Frug at this point. So this is, I like this shot from Sir Hanman because it's a different shot. He's thrown, it's a different mechanic. I mean, he's thrown a lot of wraps to the body, but that's the first wrap to the head we see. And in this case, Frug's sword recovery into that position just happens to pick it up really nicely. And into, I believe, the final exchange. Leans out again, so that shield edge picks up some of that block, and his head leaning out of the way makes sure that the rest of it doesn't hit the head. Now, here we see the first leg wrap, I think, of the fight. I think the only leg shot of the fight. There. Now, that might hit a tiny bit low, or it might be blocked. It looks like it's blocked because it looks like it's bent the shield some. It's hard to say. But regardless, it's not a good leg shot. But it's the first one thrown. The other thing is the hand position. It's probably a setup, because if the hand was towards the camera, then you could get a deeper angle on that leg wrap where the blade's like that or like that and get around that shield edge and hit that leg. But as we see, this might just be a setup, low, high. And that's the shot that ends the fight. So let's take a quick look at this fight. And again, I really like the body position. This is the same as the other one we stopped on before. Sir Hanman's body position's great. He's got his center grip shield all the way over on the other side of his body because he thinks that Frug can really only throw an onside shot from that position, or an offside that would get fouled on his own offside headshot, right? So his sword basket and blade are providing some defense, and then his shield's blocking that whole side of his body other than the legs, right? And then he's gotten pretty angled over. He's moved quite deep. We can see that he got his basket hilt close to his opponent's defense, right? If his basket had been here and the blade was out here, that would have been another block. But instead, he got his hand all the way forward near the edge of Frug's shield, which let the blade angle around and hit Frug in the head. So let's take a look at that mechanic one more time. Right, so he steps in, throws the leg shot, right? Doesn't land the leg shot, but now, as he recovers over, he swaps his shield down for body defense as he brings the hand attack up for head defense and pop on the way out. And that's the shot that lands. So overall, I thought it was a really interesting fight to watch. It's a different set of blows than I'm used to seeing thrown. You will see offside heads a lot. Like I said, I'm not used to seeing so many body and head wraps. More leg wraps. But as much as I find interesting what's thrown, like, wow, maybe I should be throwing more body wraps and more head wraps when fighting offhanded. Maybe I should be looking at that. The other thing that's interesting is the stuff that isn't thrown. Not a lot of slot shots, not a lot of moulinets, only one leg shot, only one thrust, no feints, no combos. So I would really love to get out to Northshield and do some fighting out there and see how the style matchup works, because that's always really interesting. It's always difficult to observe from afar, but this is a different style of combat than I'm used to seeing, and it was, I think, a really fun fight between these two guys. So thank you very much for requesting that I go over this video. If you found it to be fruitful or useful, please leave a comment to let me know. If you have, I'm certain, as I said, I missed things, especially being not from that area, so please feel free to correct anything where it feels like maybe I made a false assumption or something like that. Also, if you have any video you would like me to review, whether it's of one of your fights or the fights of some other fighters that you would like me to take a look at, I'll do my best to do so, and that applies to non-SCA combat as well. So, thank you very much.